I've been out for a ride on the Kawasaki, which I'll talk about in a minute actually. Yeah, it's so hot. The problem with sort of doing a ride video is you get so much glare on the screen, and it's just a nightmare. So I thought I'd come up under the round tree, and I'll be covered by its gentle shadow today. But what I thought I'd talk about a few things really. One was the ABR. I wanted to talk about that a little bit, but also cover off a couple of bits on previous episodes. Now I thought it was really interesting, you know, when the episode I did, it was a Wednesday Bike Club one with the protective clothing and stuff, and it was really interesting, you know, and all the comments are valid. But really interesting people's thoughts about, you know, compulsory clothing, and I think the consensus was no, we don't want compulsory clothing, and I completely understand that. But also the other sort of person, we should just do as we feel like, and that's quite right. We shouldn't lose our freedoms, but I suppose for me it's always that thing about, you know, if you take some precaution, then the problem with sort of distraction of being hit by stones and wasps. I can't remember, was it Mark or something said he was struck by 5 wasps or something? And yeah, I think Peter in France was in it. I think you got whacked by a pigeon. That's France for you though, isn't it? But yeah, it was quite interesting, wasn't it? It was quite great comments, and some of them were quite sort of vehement in their to get across their point, and I really like that. I think that's important. Don't ever stop doing that, because I think that's really important. But I think you always know that I try and give a sort of balanced view if I can. But I feel quite strongly that it's good to wear, even if it's sort of like just light clothing, something, you know, to remove that distraction. And as we were saying, there was the protective clothing might not necessarily stop you copping it. But it might reduce the injury, I suppose. That's the thing. And it was someone was saying about, and that was an interesting point. You know, what do companies like Uber Eats and Just Eats and all the rest of it? What do they? Do you think they They must have certain requirements on their riders, you know, because obviously they're responsible for their safety, aren't they? And you'd think that they must have a certain amount of protective clothing. I know they seem to wear sort of big parkas and things, don't they, and that, but I wonder if they are, maybe they have their own clothing made, I don't know. Once one person's, you know, copped it, they hand on that jacket to the next person. That's terrible, isn't it? But, you know where I'm going with that. But yeah, it's really interesting that, and I think it was, people really wanted to get their point across about protective clothing, but compulsory, no, we've got helmets. I'd like to see gloves be compulsory maybe, but I don't know how people don't ride in gloves, you know. I find that really difficult. A glove gives you a bit more sort of purchase on the grips, doesn't it? But I always feel really vulnerable without gloves on my bike. But yeah, that's just me. So yeah, very interesting about that. The other thing was people's thoughts on the Kawasaki. I think in general terms, people thought it was good, and yeah, there's still stuff to do on here. A lot of people said about putting the mudguard back on, which I think I will, but I am going to cut that mudguard when the weather's a little bit more conducive to doing, you know, wielding angle grinders and stuff. I will cut the mudguard and put it on, because the mudguard has sort of stays that come, you know, it's got like long stays either side. I want to lose those because it's got fixings here and here, which also support the mudguard. So the mudguard will probably be only sort of that long, you know, sort of that go from that to that. But that's what I'll do. But the funny thing with this, I've ridden it up here today to the round tree, and I was doing my usual, and it is warm today, as you'd expect. I've been doing my usual playing with the choke and all the rest of it. But when I came out of Petworth, I wasn't going to ride through Petworth because I must be driving people mad with this bike. But coming up to Tillington, and there was no choke on, and it's running smooth as hell. So maybe whatever's blocking, fingers crossed, touch wood, whatever was blocking that carburetor oil doing it, maybe that's just, you know, sucked through now. I don't know, but it seemed all right. There was no spluttering as I come up here. Maybe because it's completely warmed up. It takes a while for this to warm up, even in sort of 30-degree heat. But yeah, but there you go. But yeah, thanks for the comments on that. I think most people appreciated it, but most people know that I will have to put some quietening on it for the MOT. But I thought I'd drag it out this morning. Even in the garage, you know, this thing was really hot. It always worries me, you know, I know the Meteor's been sitting outside, and that was, you could hear the fuel sort of leak, you know, hissing out the cap, which is, you know, designed to do, and it gets like, shh, blimey, it's so incredibly hot. But we are now, well, this is going out well after the event, but we're coming into that area now where it's dying down, the heat, and but blimey, at night, talk about difficult to keep cool. Bedroom was just red hot, and not in a good way. Last night was terrible. Me and Karen didn't hardly slept at all, and Karen was doing a charity ride tonight, so she had to take the bike out. Poor girl, she was so exhausted. But never mind. Yeah, it's the weekend, so not a great deal to do this weekend. Now, onto the crux of it. ABR. I was watching that biker Simon this morning. He was doing like the Thursday walk round for the ABR before, you know, everybody turns up. You know, they're all setting up. Well, I think everybody is set up, but they, you know, it's not such a busy day there. And you got, so this was yesterday, I think he filmed that, and I think it was something like 36-degree heat there. Wow. But what struck me is that how big ABR is now. I mean, it is the premier bike event, isn't it, for the year? I think that it's taking people away from the NEC. I think the problem with the NEC is that it's an expensive thing, and not so many people seem to show up to the NEC. The manufacturers turn up to the NEC because I suppose with the ABR, you've got all that outdoor space, and it's lovely. And when you've got great weather like this, it's really going to attract people. But the NEC, I think the problem with the NEC is that it charges a lot of money. You know, you pay for your parking and all the rest of it. You think, damn that. And I think people don't want to do that anymore. And I think as time goes on, people's loyalties shift, don't they, to other things. I've had enough of that, I'm going to go here. Now, I don't know the price. I'm going to put the ticket price up, or there won't be any tickets available, I can imagine. But the ABR is not cheap, is it? But it does sell itself on value. So you can look at the price and see if it is value. I think it is. I think when you look at what you get, and this is what I wanted to look at, when you look at the manufacturers there and the amount of demo bikes that they have, my goodness me, don't they have a lot of demo bikes? I can remember a few years ago, which was, I think, was the point when ABR really started to kick into a different gear, because BSA were there, and BSA basically just had their Gold Star at that point. And they seem to have dozens of these Gold Stars. And I can remember sort of saying, well, you know, they couldn't shift them, so they can't do something with them. But it was that point where manufacturers were bringing bikes which didn't have an adventure bike theme to them as such. But we know that people, you know, will load up bikes like this and go on an adventure. But in that sort of like, you know, adventure style bike, if you like, you know, like GSs and stuff. And I think manufacturers saw that as a really good opportunity to demo, and you know, because you can catch so many people at an event like that. And when you look at like GB Moto, you know, when they've got bikes to sell, you know, those heroes, those small capacity hero bikes and stuff. I mean, wow. I mean, they've got dozens of the things there. You've even got B&W with their GS450s. They've got a few of those to try out. And of course, they're then showing a lot of their other bikes there at the same time. Because you know what we're like as bikers, we like to, you know, if you're in that lucky, fortunate position where you can afford a couple of 3 bikes, you know, we don't always want one bike to do everything, do we? If we can afford it, we like several bikes to do several things. And I know it's an incredibly privileged position to be in. But goodness me, you know, you had, so GB Moto had a huge number of bikes. So they had all their, you know, QJ Motor stuff, the Vosges stuff and all the rest of it. They had loads of those bikes there that you could try. And events like that where you can then take them off or on road, you looking after those fleets. I remember when I went up to Silverstone to pick up the Enfield, the Bear that I had, you could see the fleet of bikes that they had. Enfield were using that company to look after their fleets. And that's what a lot of these manufacturers do. They don't generally look after the fleet of bikes themselves. They're press bikes, if you like, and they're looked after by another company because they obviously bring them back, service and clean them, look after them. It's not something that a manufacturer wants to do, really. They want to outsource that. But I'm keen to see if there'll be any video, because I know that the BSA are supposed to be, will be there, and they'll have the Thunderbolt there. It's not a rideable bike, but they will have the Thunderbolt there. I'm going to be very intrigued to see whether they bring any of those new bikes based on the Bantam there, which would be very interesting. They may do. But yeah, hasn't ABR become the event of the year now for motorcyclists? And what you find with, people can come out, obviously eat, meet all the people they want to do. The talks that people do are fantastic, and the bulk of those generally are adventure bike riders, aren't they, and that sort of stuff. There is another show that goes on, and Karen's been to that. I can't remember what it's called. It is an adventure bike rider show, but it's much smaller. But I think they put that into two things now, over 2 sessions. And it wouldn't surprise me if you had ABR with its success, whether that would maybe split into another event. Because at the end of the day, you've got to think that these organisations, they are businesses, and they want to generate revenue. And the more revenue they can generate, the bigger and better these things can come. I think there comes a point where, and I think that's what I was sort of trying to get to, these events can become so large that they blow themselves out. Now, I'm not saying that's going to happen to ABR. We used to have that with, with these country fairs. We used to do the Country Landowners CLA game fair every year. I used to do that with a firearms dealer, and we used to go up there, and great fun. But what you had is lots of other organisations jumping on the bandwagon of the success of that, and all these little other shows started to get bigger and bigger, and people turned away from it in the end. And you don't want that with ABR. Things become a victim of their success. But obviously the people organising ABR are really doing a great job with that. But you can see, I could see very easily that they could make other events that become specific to a genre, and that could be very useful. But I suppose it's finding sites to do that, isn't it? And again, they get popular, and then if you're not careful, people can turn against that if you're not careful. But yeah, I think ABR has been an extraordinary success and a fantastic shop front, isn't it, for all these manufacturers that just are all going in there. I mean, because it's going to be the biggest one they've ever done, and you just look at the visitor numbers, but the manufacturers bringing bikes there now. I think they're turning away slightly from the NEC, and I think you could eventually find that you'll have EICMA and you'll have ABR. So yeah, really, really interesting. And I think you also think with ABR, it's a much easier venue to get to. The NEC is just, I just don't like the NEC. It's a bit of a pain, and you're sort of like captured, aren't you? There, once you're there, you're sort of stuck. With ABR, you can go back to your tents and make your own food. It's sort of like that. It is like going on a little adventure, isn't it? And you take all your camping kit and everything, and you set your camp up, and you got everything there with you, and you don't have to rely on the food outlets. Although the food outlets are fantastic there, you've got everything you need, and you could be self-sufficient there, which is really nice. And I think that's why it was so successful to start, and why it's been so successful. I'd be interested to get your thoughts on ABR. But wow, where do all those demo bikes come from? Innit? It's funny, innit? I've said this before. Where the hell do all these bikes live? I know they're being stored somewhere, but maybe they're coming from Europe. But I suppose if they're using them on the road, they've got to be UK or they've got to be at least registered and number plated, haven't they? But you got to think, when you struggle to get bikes, you know, when there's bikes that you want and you just can't get them because you can't, you know, the manufacturer doesn't have any in the country or all the rest of it, and you go to these shows and you see hundreds of them, you think, wow, I've been wanting to buy that bike for months and I can't get it, but there's like 2 dozen of them here at an APR show. I always find that a really interesting conundrum for manufacturers. You know, I can't supply you the bike, but I got loads of them here at ABR. What do I think will be interesting bikes there? I think those QJ motors. I think that they've got their 450, haven't they? Which is basically a tracing paper copy of the CF Moto 450 MT. I think it's really funny that the Chinese are now copying the Chinese. I've said this before, but I really like the look of that bike. And they've got a rally version, I think, of that, which looks really interesting. Now we're going to be back in France. Well, when you see this, I will be in France. Me and Karen will be there, and I will pop down to the Kawasaki 24 place because they've got QJ motors there, and I'll be interested to see whether they've got that rally in there because I'd love to have a go on it. and that 450 copy. Because the QJ motors, I rode that SJ 500, was it? SJ 550, whatever it was, 650, which wasn't 650cc. Which the motor in that was phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. But I didn't like the styling of it, but the actual engine, the performance was crazily good. But I think the people have said about that 450, or was it 500, that it was a bit vibey and not so good, and I was quite shocked at that. So I think, well, if they use the same engine, I don't know how it could be so bad, but we shall see. So yeah, that was my chat. That was my chat today. I thought I'd come out on the early-ish in the morning, come out on the Kawasaki, and come to the Roundtree, because I've not been to the Roundtree for a while. Did I do a last Roundtree the other week? I think I did, didn't I? Yeah, I came up really early that morning. It is lovely today, Andrew. I could just sit here all day, actually. It's really nice. I should have bought a book, shouldn't I, and a flask. I'm going to go and grab a coffee, I think, from Kirkford stores, I think. See if they repaired their air conditioning. I went there the other day and the air conditioning had broken down overnight. And they went in and everything inside the shop was cooked. Poor buggers. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed the hot weather. And by now we should be in the cooler part, hopefully. Right, look after yourselves. And hopefully the next time you see this, there'll be some different bits in it. There'll be probably the grill on here. There'll be the mud guard. Maybe a little bit quieter, but we'll see. Look after yourselves. I'll see you soon.